The Human Founder Podcast by Gali Bloch-Liran.
Hi, I'm Gali Bloch-Liran, and welcome to The Human Founder, the podcast where we speak about the mental aspects of the entrepreneurial journey. Entrepreneurs often describe the emotional roller coaster that is embedded in being an entrepreneur or investor, where you experience the lowest of lows when you can't pay the next month's salaries, and the highest of highs when you see Mark Zuckerberg's face in the room when he's buying your company. And it's from that place of uncertainty, the need to constantly self manage ourselves, keep up our energy, and be mentally resilient in order to deal with everything. Well, it's not easy. In each episode, I will be talking to entrepreneurs, investors, psychologists, being their sounding board, with the goal of creating a space for this less spoken about layer, which is the mental aspect accompanying the entrepreneurial journey. I will also share tips and tricks to help boost your focus, clarity, and mental resilience. Today, I have the pleasure of speaking with Eden Shochat. Hi, Eden.
Hello, hello.
And I'm very happy to have you here with me.
Thank you for having me.
Eden, you're an entrepreneur turned early stage investor at Aleph, a venture capital fund with $550 million under management. Prior to Aleph, you were a general partner at Genesis Partners. As a serial entrepreneur, you also co founded Face.com. We'll speak about it, a global leader in massive web scale face recognition in social network, which was acquired by Facebook in 2012. And we're having so many different topics to talk about them today, from your days as a founder, entrepreneur, and turning to investor. And I want maybe to begin with this exactly, highs of highs moment I mentioned that you just told me a few seconds ago. You're entering a room with Gil, your co-founder, for a meeting, interested in buying your company, and you see Mark, and we're talking about which year was it?
So we actually don't see Mark.
Okay.
So one of the funny things about Face.com is that everyone thought that we're in competition with Facebook because Facebook did have at some point a face recognition feature. The joke is that it's actually us, right? So we licensed our face recognition algorithms to Facebook, and under NDA, we couldn't talk about this. We couldn't just say anything, but we did have very good relationship with Amin Zufanun that just left Facebook after I think 12 years. So and he ran Corp Dev, and we had that deal, and it was really hard deal to make, and Amin was wonderful, like Iranian born, loves Israel, just a great guy. And he sends an email saying, "Hey, I hear Gil and you are in San Francisco. How about we get together?" I said, "Fine." 2 days before the meeting, he sends, "Hey, a couple of product people want to join." Obviously, we think that they want to bitch and moan about something around the API, and that we provided them. And because we very intentionally did not provide mobile capabilities. We basically said if they ever go mobile, we should make it that they will need to buy us. Right? That's how the agreement went. And so we're sure that they want to bitch and moan. And I mean, we meet and it's great. And he says, "Why did you raise money? Why didn't you come talk to us about the acquisition?" Fine. 30 minutes in, we talk about cap tables, boring stuff. And I ask him, "You said a couple of product people want to join." So yeah, Shrep is coming. Shrep is now the CTO of Meta. Um, great, pretty boring discussion. But 30 minutes in, I said a couple of product people are supposed to join, and he said, "Yeah, Zuck is coming."
Product people.
Product people, exactly. So
The
he,
product people.
yeah,
The
so
product.
definitely a product
A
person.
product.
And having him come in, I think the key thing is he said, "Hey, so what? How are you thinking about face recognition?" And we spoke what our vision was, which we thought was quite broad, like identity and what it means. And then he said, "Well, that's not big enough," and started talking about how he sees it, which was bigger. Um, and then as he left, because I think he said that he was late to his girlfriend at the time. She just graduated from university, I think medical school. And he looks at Amin and says, "Well, if the numbers make sense, we should make this work."
The product
So
guy.
yeah, so he definitely bombed that meeting. It was I
did
so
did you understand in that specific moment how big it is?
um I guess that at least mentally. So I was so out that when we left to drive, the next meeting was with LinkedIn Corp Dev,
Hmm.
and I couldn't turn on my car. I forgot to hit the brakes when I was trying to turn on the car, and we call car service, and they ended up coming after we had the meeting, and they just laughed and kind of like, yeah, it's working.
It's
So
like you
yeah,
were overwhelmed from what
yeah.
happened back in
So
the
so
room.
yeah,
It's like
I'm not sure Gil remembers that, but
it could
uh,
be nice to talk to him about it to reflect back.
but yeah. So at least mentally, I was totally out of it.
When you think it was like 10, 12 years ago,
That was 2012, so 10 years
10
ago.
years
10
ago.
years ago.
So when you reflect back today about the entrepreneur that you were then and this, meeting, pivotal and meaningful meeting, what do you think about it like from a bigger perspective today?
That was freaking lucky. Look, the issue is, and we all were, we kind of had the inklings of a business model at the time, right? We actually started the company, and we it was so clear we don't have a business model that Yaniv, our co-founder, CTO, actually wrote code in assembly code just to reduce the cost because we had no idea how we are going to make money. So we said at least that it should cost less. So it shows you kind of priorities. So if I reflect back, I think Michael, my co-founder at Aleph, said it very rightly when we were thinking about Aleph. He said this is a unique moment in time. You still have kind of that experience, and there needs to be a change of guard. And this is the younger population, the people actually that worked and in the new generation, the new era. So in many ways, that jump started Aleph.
It's beautiful to sometimes reflect back and see how a specific moment in time paved the way for something bigger later on, but only in retrospective we can sometimes connect the dots and to see
Absolutely.
what led to another. You mentioned luck, and we'll get to it in a second, but I want to go back to your childhood as a young boy in a kibbutz, right? That's how it began. That was
Yeah.
the young Eden.
What's the how do you say Leina
I just
Mashutefet?
thought about it now. I don't know, communal. I'm not sure what is the right term because
Uh,
I'm not. I don't think there is such a thing in other places, as far as I know.
How?
But a
Yeah.
communal area where all the children actually sleep together, not with their families, but with their peers, actually with the children in their ages.
Yeah. How to fuck up your kids in the shortest possible way. I actually don't have an issue, but I still remember like as a 3-year-old waking up at night hearing another kid crying for his mom, and it's you think back and I think about my kids and like how can you actually think that the kids shouldn't be with their parents? That's just like it's crazy. But yeah, that so actually so I we left when I was 3.5 and left to Nigeria. So it was a limited period, thankfully.
So you began in the kibbutz, you left to Nigeria, and then later also to Liberia. And like, how was it to spend your childhood in different places? What did it give you to your personality traits, to your strength, to the way that you cope with things? How did it build you?
I have no idea.
You have no
That's
idea.
so I can tell you about things that happen, which is again when you think back, I still have an issue with my 11-year-olds. It's like when they go out with our puppy, it's like, can you go out? Is it too dark? Is it not? What's in the area? So and they're like my twins are 11, and when I was 8, I was actually flying. You had only one flight between Israel and Nigeria once a week through Switzerland.
Mhm,
And so I was flying as a UM and unaccompanied minor.
mhm.
And one time I missed a flight. And so I'm in Switzerland
All by
for,
myself.
for a week, not by myself because it's a UM.
Yeah.
So the stewardess. So I actually
So,
had the airline stewardess coming
yes.
in twice a day to check on me, and I'm like 8 year old, and I'm shocked that that was even possible.
Mhm.
So I wouldn't be able to say like what it how it impacted. It definitely I was thrown out of well, now that I think about it, I was thrown out of school twice. So in Nigeria, they were still it's an American school, and they were hitting with a ruler when
Right.
kids were uh,
Still in this time.
yeah, which again
Hmm.
crazy, and so I stopped going and just learned by myself. And when I went back to Israel, I kind of figured I was in sixth grade. I came in fourth grade, but I was learning the sixth grade materials. But that was kind of like I think the key thing it impacted. It was so boring in Nigeria. There's nothing to do. Like Ibadan, a 15 million people city, nothing to do. So I learned how to program. So I should be very very thankful. That for me that was the key reason why I could become an entrepreneur later.
Hmm. So one hand is the fact that you can teach yourself and say that you're bored. So what do you do with your time and how do you leverage your inner skills and the things that you want to learn? But the other thing, which maybe comes also from the experience in the kibbutz and then later on flying alone when you're at the age of 8, is like learning also to count on yourself and to know that, okay, there may be a mess. Maybe I don't know how to play with all the cards that I have, but I trust myself that I'll find a way. And you see it later on along the way that you have 16 years as an entrepreneur from one company to another, something that tell me if it makes sense to you, something very strong from your inner abilities, that to lead yourself in this entrepreneurial journey from one thing to another, to trust yourself that maybe you'll cope with many challenges, but you'll figure it out in this way or another.
So the honest response is I had no idea how hard it is to be an entrepreneur.
Mhm.
And so like
We usually
the
don't know
yeah
it
yeah the
in
clueless
advance.
yeah the cluelessness is actually a feature, not a bug there. So
It's part of what makes us do it because if we would know everything,
yeah, it would
it,
like it's much it has become easier in some ways and harder in other ways in the last 20 years I say. But like the one thing is not accepting the status quo
mhm,
is something that you do kind of learn because you can change the world around you. And I've had a lot of those experiences growing up. So maybe like the discontent with the status quo would
mhm.
be one takeaway.
Yeah, it's a good one. So not accepting the status quo, and we continue with your life and after school and after the army, and you actually find yourself starting to work and actually in Nintendo, right?
No, so I was working at
That's
Nintendo when I was 15.
15, that
So
young,
that's
that
actually
young.
why I was thrown out. I think to this date I'm the only one that was able to get thrown out from Metro West Ra'anana. It was really hard to get thrown out. But I
You
was
made it.
just I was just working nights. And it didn't seem very relevant to go to school. Especially I had a math teacher. I was working on 3D engines.
Mhm.
I had a math teacher. I had a problem around matrix multiplication or to 3D transformations, and I go to my teacher and ask her, listen, so I have this issue. It's working in these conditions. It doesn't work in those conditions. And she said, no, you 3D transformations are with sinus and cosinus. It's not with matrices. Like, no, I'm sure it's with matrices. This is how the world works. And she argued with me, and I think that I definitely lost respect for her at that point. But yeah, I just didn't feel that school was actually giving me much, and I hit almost 100 days of non-attendance. And at what I heard is I was the second class of the school, and they had to report to Ministry of Education once you cross 100. So we had a mutual agreement that I should not continue in that school.
And
So yeah,
moving,
and then so I was working
yeah.
I was working a bunch, right? It's I was in a something called a demo scene. So kids, I was 13 at the time, and you wrote code in pure assembly to build worlds. Like there was a group called Future Crew, and I was part of a Finnish group called Avalanche, and we were competing. So I was 13, and I flew to Finland. That was the competition,
You
Recently.
see, you weren't afraid to fly because at the age of
Oh yeah.
8, you already did it by
It's,
yourself. So it's
no,
like everything.
13 is old, right?
It's old.
I actually
It's a
did.
mature age
I
already.
did the my
But you're
parents.
still afraid that you're twins at
Yeah,
11 years.
which is silly, right? But I wanted my parents asked me whether I want to do a bar mitzvah party or fly out to the U.S. And I said fly out to the U.S. They didn't have time, so actually I flew in into New York and met with an admin of my father's company who he never met,
Mhm.
and she and I traveled the U.S. For my bar mitzvah tour. So it's like, yeah.
Sounds
Um,
fun.
but I was 13, and I was competing in Finland, and there was a Nintendo recruiter in the competition. And so when I was 15, I started working there.
One thing led to another.
Yeah.
And after the army, when you actually you decide you want to become an entrepreneur, you just start and play with things. It's inner calling. How the beginning how the beginning happens actually.
There was a problem. There was a in Nintendo we kept building 3D engines.
Hmm.
It seemed stupid that you would build an engine from the get go as a not even as a game developer, right? You have game developers, AAA games that so they can build it, but then you had at the time 400,000 developers of Macromedia, now Adobe, that didn't have those, and it seemed like a worthwhile problem. But like I didn't think about this as a startup. I just thought about this as a problem worth solving.
So tell me about your first company. What was
So
there?
Shells
Shells.
Interactive. It took me a bunch of time to admit that it was a failure.
What
I was
what was so difficult for you about it?
um well, admitting failure. I think that's a very common thing that is hard to do. Um, but so I was walking around post that and was still saying, well, it was a successful technology and product, just but admittedly we didn't have a business model, and it was fine because it was 99. No one had a business model at the time. And but then 2001 came,
Hmm.
right? So even those with a business model didn't quite work out. Um, but but yeah, it was building, raising capital, hiring people. We had 20 people working there. Actually, we were in the Google building just now, and there's a bunch of Googlers that actually worked at the company.
At Shell
Yeah,
back in '99.
back at 99, which
Wow.
is funny. It's ancient history. So yeah, it's uh, like many failures, we just ran out of money. But
Mhm.
the honest thing is, we never thought fully as to how we make money off of this, right? And if you fast forward and look at YouTube,
Mhm.
right? So YouTube, the reason why YouTube worked is that you could embed a video and play it anywhere. Now, the technology that enabled that is actually a technology by Macromedia called Flash,
Mhm.
which they acquired. It
Mhm.
wasn't theirs; they acquired it. That was playing video at 98% of the world's browsers. Flash got well, obviously YouTube got
Mhm.
1.6 billion. Flash got $1,000, and they enabled YouTube, right? And we had a similar issue, right? So we were building authoring tools, but weren't making money off of the content. So it was just like naivete, and I don't think I ever found, at least in that stage, the mentors. I hate the word mentor, but
Mhm.
collaborator,
Mhm.
in order to discuss really
Mhm.
like how do you make money off of this.
It's like you describe it, and it it seems like it wasn't in your consciousness to think about money. Like, how do we make money out of it? We have an idea, it's really nice. It's still the naive part of entrepreneurship. But then at the end, in the business model of entrepreneurship that we want to bring fundraising into it, and there are investors, etc., etc. Like we always like to say with investors, follow the money, right? The startups needs to understand how it goes, how it works, and it's like you're describing something a bit naive back then in 99, that you just wanted to build something, you had a nice idea, but that wasn't on the top of your mind.
Hmm. That's a good observation. I think so. I could blame the kibbutz, right? I think kibbutz.
We're not blaming, we're
No,
taking responsibility. We're learning
yeah,
from
yeah, yeah. No,
mistakes, we're not
and
blaming.
but that's actually my point. So I could blame the kibbutz. I think the best way to describe kibbutz is that you can share everything as
Uh-huh,
long as you have nothing.
uh-huh.
Um, so maybe that part, but really, I think that in general, you need to remember the time, right? So eyeballs, and you could convince yourself wrongly that, hey, I'm building an authoring tool, and all those people will look at whatever is authored, and those are eyeballs, and we'll find a way to make money off of them. But if you look at Wix right now, right, they're an authoring tool
Mm-hmm.
which creates websites. Those websites, if you don't pay, actually have created by Wix,
Mm-hmm.
and many of the customers of Wix come in because they saw created
Mm-hmm.
with Wix,
It's a good advertisement.
right?
Yeah.
It's wonderful, and
Mm-hmm.
in many ways, that was kind of the model, but there weren't users on the internet, right? So like there's so many. I have a friend I love, Amit Kanani, and she has an idea that there should be a retro VC,
Mm-hmm.
like that takes ideas that in '99 just didn't work because you didn't have enough users on the
To
internet,
take them to the next
and
level and to
and
make the
basically bring
adjustments
it
to what
now.
happens. Yeah.
Yeah, and in many ways you don't need to adjust,
Mm-hmm.
right? It's just that you actually need customers, and we
Mm-hmm.
did. There were no customers at the
Mm-hmm.
time.
So yeah, and I think it even has another level of. I always like to talk about it with founders. The whole perception of abundance and of financials. It's something that meets the founders in various levels. The first one is when you choose to be a founder and the trade-offs that sometimes are a part of it. What when you leave a corporation or if you have a mortgage, what is the situation back at home, and if you can afford yourself to be a founder, especially in days like today, that in the past maybe within 3 months we could raise funds, but now sometimes it can take in specific startups, not always, but
No,
but
I'm
founders,
laughing because you're calling it the past. Or you mean
no,
a year ago?
yeah,
Like
yeah,
there was the
a year
past
ago,
past,
the
there was
the,
past
the
past
close
past,
past, the close past.
right? Because
So
in
yeah.
95,
Mhm.
99, there was like, remember there were like 10 VCs in
Mhm.
the entirety of
Mhm.
Israel,
Mhm.
right?
Yeah,
So
definitely. I take it. But the idea is that we spoke about money, and part of the things that founders needs to understand the trade-offs that once they choose the entrepreneurial journey, sometimes there is a lot of trade-off with the financial aspect in their life, especially in the beginning, and it goes deeper even later on, with the salaries, and later on with the equity and the teams, and later on in the investments. And it's like I connected to the naive state of mind that you had back then in Shell, because at the end it's we need to have a business model in order to close this, to close the loop, to bring the money that it will circulate later on within the system, like to create a closed and evolving system within it.
yeah, what screwed up the last say 10 years of heavy money printing in the U.S. is that you could always depend on the next check writer,
Mm-hmm.
and so that reality kind of
Changed.
changes,
Mm-hmm.
and in many ways it's going back to the basics of you actually need to make money,
Mm-hmm.
and reminds me,
Actually need to make money. It's
yeah,
like you said it, you
yeah,
say it now, and it's like this is the reality, and
yeah.
this is, I think, like the
Look,
needle in the balloon that we actually need to make money.
yeah, that's a simplistic thing. It's a question. It's, as you said, it's a question of trade-offs. It's not
Mm-hmm.
just trade-offs between the being an employee and being an entrepreneur,
Mm-hmm.
right? Opportunity cost,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Mm-hmm.
On average, it's much
Mm-hmm.
better to be a Google or a Meta employee, like on average,
Mm-hmm.
as far as monetary gain. But obviously, outliers won't happen in corporates.
Mm-hmm.
So that's one side of the opportunity cost, but the other is just trade-offs of growth versus financial viability, right? So if you, and that's very descriptive of '99, but it's also descriptive of 2020 and 2021, and to an extent a bit before that, where if you get credit for growth, then selling a dollar for 90 cents, right, where that delta is actually paid for by VCs,
Mm-hmm.
that's what the market is expecting from you. And suddenly there's a hard stop. And so, how long does it take you to get that investment back? It takes you 4 years,
Mm-hmm.
right? And regardless of macro and interest rates, it's just mind-boggling. So it's at that point it was kind of, how do we take over a market? But then the flip side of it is when you look from the outside in, also as a founder, you're looking at it, you're saying, well, I just spent $20 million this year, and I got $10 million more of ARR, or 5 million, and you kind of look at that and say, does that make sense, right? And that's a big shift. Mostly the incentives. I'm a big believer in tell me what's your incentives, and I'll tell you how you'll behave.
Hmm.
Right? I'm a huge
Let's
believer in
dive
that.
deep. Let's dive deeper into
How?
it. Well, you speak about incentive versus, not versus, that leads, to behaviors.
Mm-hmm.
So it's like we can call it incentives, we can call it motivations, right? What actually makes us do something, and I think that the baseline of it is actually what makes us be a founder. Like what make me, for example, build this startup? Okay, what is my why? What is my incentive to do this? And then how I behave in that manner. So how do you see the let's if we can call it the good incentives or maybe the bad incentives that lead us to later on to the way we behave in the startup.
I'm not sure they're good and bad incentives. I think,
That's why I did like this. Like
yeah,
it's on a spectrum. Like the
the yeah, there are bad incentives, but I look back as entrepreneur, and I remember I just had my twin boys. They were born week 30,
mm,
and so we were at the NICU
mhm,
at
thank you.
the
Yeah,
Tipul
Nimbus.
Nimatzle, yeah,
Yeah.
and I remember being in the parents' room negotiating a secondary at Face.com
Wow.
because this is what we needed as founders in order to feel that we should continue. And if you remember Foursquare, I was actually the mayor of the hospital, right? Because I was there every day for a month and a half, and so people are kind of like, "What are you doing at the hospital?" And in my mind, yeah, there was the hospital me, and then there is the need to negotiate the secondary um, in the parking lot, in the parents' room. And so the incentive at the time was, hey, I want to secure a future for my kids. I want to
Mhm,
secure the future for the company. And so this just needs to happen. So it doesn't matter what I'm going through in my personal life.
mhm,
This needs to happen. But
mhm,
many times there's that kind of combination of incentives. Venture is really weird around incentives, and that's not spoken enough, right? Just to give you a kind of top level example, in a good fund, there is one breakout company.
mhm,
In a great fund, there are two. Now, think of a partnership. Say the partnership has four investors. What it means is that for every given fund, one or possibly two investors are responsible for all the fund returns because
mhm,
that's how it works with the
mhm.
funds. So think about the mind fuck that it is when you're a four-person partnership, but only one or maybe two
Are in
in the
charge.
fund
Yeah.
are not in charge.
Okay.
So it, being in charge is a whole different thing and
No, like they
succession.
they bring
But they
the
brought
success. Yeah.
they made the fund,
Mm-hmm.
that specific fund, what
Mm-hmm.
it is. And so it's a fund in the case of Aleph is 12 plus 3 plus 3, so it's 18 years.
Mm-hmm.
But you raise another fund after 3 years. But for a fairly long period, you're walking around saying, I'm a slacker. I just think about the incentives of being able to kind of hold yourself together and be part of the partnership, knowing that you didn't contribute what you should and still maintain that kind of ability for trying again in the next fund after that and the one after that. And the feedback cycles are incredibly long.
Mm-hmm.
So I did um, the Pulse, now Monday.com. I did the seed, like $1 million, a 3 million pre, but it took 6, 7 years before that was an apparent good company. Right, so just the feedback cycles are so long, and it plays with your mind a lot. So
Mm-hmm.
the incentives of wanting to be a contributing member of the partnership, but not knowing that you are actually a contributing member of the partnership.
It's sometimes just in retrospective that you can understand everything that happened there, and also you need a lot of patience, and it's true for both for partners in a VC and both for the founders, because and it connects us also to luck, because you can do many things along the way, and you're not sure what will be the endeavor that will really pay off or will really make the company succeed, and it can happen from the one thing that you didn't expect that will actually bring this result, and later on what you say it was luck. Yeah.
Yeah.
But we can debate about it whether it was luck or that I'm planting many seeds and I'm working towards it, and I'm advancing it, and then one of these seeds really grow up to something. So it connects the 2 points of how we need to behave and to be, you know, calm and patience about everything that happens and to balance it. Because if I go back to the example that you mentioned that you're in the NICU versus the secondary, that you all the time needs to manage this inner conversation that you have within you. Okay, I want to take care of my children's future on the one hand, but I want to be present with them at the same time, and I want to support my spouse at the same time. But how do I split myself to all of these parts that I need to function in it? And then later on, in the same way that you plant so many seeds, that later on just one of them succeed. And it's a lot of inner mental work to hold this complexity together.
You raised so many um, topics at the same time. So I'll try to break it to a few. First, the beautiful thing and the hard thing about startups is actually the feedback loop is fairly quick, right? So because it can be a deal, it can be a bringing additional customers, cracking some challenge around the product, whatever. But the feedback, especially in non-enterprise type startups, is quite quick, which is great because it's the dopamine rushes and you know where to focus on because you kind of know what works. But the bad thing is that it's pulling you completely, right? So, and I don't need to tell you that, and I don't need to tell many of the listeners, but it's um, because of those dopamine rushes, because of the fact that there is a satisfaction by building something, then it pulls you so strongly that it's actually hard to do anything else, right? And
It's addicting in a way.
it's totally addictive.
Hmm.
Interestingly, the best founders I know, and I always say that, but now I have a few candidates. But what I always said is that if I ever have a cloning machine,
Hmm.
Yuval Kaminka and Roy
Hmm.
Tskovsky from Joyto and
Joy to
Simply
simply.
would be first in line if I ever have
Wow.
that. And
Did you
actually,
tell them this in person?
oh yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, absolutely. And you can like there. I love Yuval. I literally love Yuval,
He
and
was
I
here as
learned
well.
there. I I learn from him. I learn almost like every time we interact, and he is really, really, really good at not planting the seeds.
Hmm.
So he's really good to say these are the things that matter. This is how I will create the incentive systems, meaning what are the targets, what are the KRs, OKRs, right? In order to push all the company towards that direction. And by definition, I will ignore many opportunities. And
Laser focused to what he
n-
wants to go, where he
i-
wants to go.
definitely, well, he constantly reevaluates and that team reevaluates, but it almost that he doesn't have FOMO.
Hmm.
Like everyone has FOMO, and for him, he reminds me of Michael, Mike at Aleph, where Michael doesn't have FOMO about investments, and it's such a.
Do you have?
I still have some. So when I came into Genesis, one of the first things that they told me is that is a sentence that sounds true but is not. I can say now, which is don't feel bad about investments you haven't done. It will give you more time to feel bad about those that you did. And uh, and it's actually counter to anything VC, right? VC is all about the outliers. So you should actually daily feel bad about those that you didn't and figure out. I love Ray Dalio in Principles, right? So Principles is a way to kind of post mortem and think about it. And you need to constantly think, why did I miss that? And what can I change in my behavior that would make it so that I'll make that investment in the future. And but the flip side, the important thing about venture is that it's there. It's actually you plant a lot of seeds, right? And it can be about deal flow, and it can be about follow-on investments, and it can be around just helping out the company. I'll tell you something like totally random that just happened now. There is Web Summit, which is like
Hmm.
crazy, 73,000 people. I'm an introvert in basic, and so I never go to something like this. But after Web Summit, they have a smaller conference, just 250 people called Founders, and just came back last week. The the very smart thing that Paddy is able to do there is that he's mixing the people all the time. So
Mhm.
you don't get to sit to where you want at dinner. You're assigned. Same with lunch, round tables. So they force you into round tables with other people. Activities. So going to one of those activities, winemaking, which
Mhm.
we screwed up totally. The team I was at, including myself, we screwed it so badly. I think we were the worst. And but
Was it
traveling
white or red?
red, and
Red.
you had to compose three different wines to get the target wine that they
Okay.
gave us.
Okay.
And we apparently we didn't listen that wine number one is the base, and so
Mhm.
we decided that wine number two must be the
And it's
base.
chemistry,
Yeah, it's
it's
chemistry
chemistry.
and it's taste, and I
But we didn't listen.
yeah.
This is the postmortem that we do. We
Yeah,
didn't listen,
yeah.
right?
Oh no, we definitely didn't listen. But on the way back on the bus, I sit with a bunch of people, and one of them is complaining or is sharing the hardship that he has a 800-person office in New York, and in a good day, 50 people come now. And for him, it's really hard, and it's actually it's an important topic, and we discussed that, and then I hear he is actually the founder CEO of Noom, which is one of the fastest growing B2C apps in the world, around lifestyle wellness, weight reduction, etc. And we start talking about Simply, right, about Joy Tunes, and about how you do TV advertising. And he said, "Yeah, we're advertising $100 million a year," and we started talking about that. And he just gave a brilliant advice that I think is worth tens of millions of ARR. And that was a totally random thing, right? Remember, like
What did he say?
multiple about elderly
Uh-huh.
gifting by elderly. You actually a grandfather or grandparent would
Mhm.
want to give a physical gift
Mhm.
to the grandchild.
Mhm.
So when you pitch them, even though it's an app,
Mhm.
what you want to pitch is a box
Mhm.
that then
Something physical,
grant
tangible that they can
exactly that they can
feel.
come
The,
and give that
the attachment, the connection with it.
exactly, which is just it almost seems
So
obvious,
obvious,
yeah.
right? But sometimes
But
the most obvious things are the simplest
and
thing.
he tried many things. So but the point, and it goes back to luck, right?
Mhm.
Think of the number of random things that needed to happen, right? So I was this close not to go to Lisbon because I had no one to watch over my kids.
Mhm.
So number one, even choosing to go there, then choosing the specific event because there were multiple events around founders. Then uh, finishing last, and so going on the last bus, sitting at the area, starting to talk with the
Mhm.
person, talking with them about B2C. Like,
So many
s-
circumstances that had to align
yeah,
to
if you
one result, right?
yeah, if you multiply that, then the likelihood of that happening is like sub 1%
Mhm.
chance. But and I had a big argument about that with a good friend of mine at the time. That she said, we try to analyze kind of mathematically the topic of luck, right? And a graph,
Mhm.
right? So graph of things of connections and chance happenings, and
What did you find out?
so we think very differently, and she thinks about think of it as gravitational forces where you have more likelihood of information flowing towards you,
Mhm.
the more the graph is dense, right?
Mhm.
So the more
Mhm.
connections you
Mhm.
have,
Mhm.
and in my mind, it's just random happenings according to the graph density. But so you can increase the likelihood of something good happening. You just have no idea what will happen,
It's
right?
also a
And
matter of, cognitive bias of awareness, actually, of awareness of those things, also to see them, to be able to see them.
Absolutely, and I think that even when you do have that awareness, the question is, um, why would it happen? And like, can you accept the fact that you just want to maximize the likelihood of something good happening without knowing what will happen? And that's
Mhm.
the seeds that you spoke
Mhm.
about. And I think it's very different between venture,
Mhm.
where uh, keep in mind that when you raise a fund, the structure of fees,
Mhm.
meaning the what's called management fees,
Mhm.
is
The carry.
guaranteed
Mhm.
for 10 years. In
Mhm.
Israel, it's what, like four governments, right? And so you have such
Minimum.
a it's such an anti-fragile type of a company where a startup has typically 18 months between
Mhm.
fundraisers, and a VC would have a guaranteed 10
10
years of
years.
income So you can do very long-term things. So you can go way, way, way towards chance happenings versus being laser focused,
Hmm.
right? And so it then generates different incentives, and so that's
You
why
have a stability,
exactly you
a
can.
kind of stability that you can count on and plan
It's not
according
a
to.
kind.
It's a
It's
stability.
it's
Yeah,
a
10 years, it's
huge
pretty
yeah,
stable.
and every time you raise another fund,
Hmm.
there is a reset. So now
Hmm.
it's another 10 years,
Hmm.
right? So it allows you to do such long-term things that are just impossible to do as a startup.
And maybe we can jump between the things, but it's a beautiful shift and new perception to look at and to look from that as an entrepreneur and a founder, everything is unstable and you're living in a VUCA world and everything is uncertainty and this volatility of everything and everything that changes all the time. And when you turn to the other side to be an investor, so the perception is changing, and the way that you treat later on the founders, the fact that you have been a founder in the past can give you a lot of leverage in understanding them and what's going on with them and the way that they act, the way that they function, and to see them in a better perspective.
You're right, but I'll say something that is against my vested interest,
Okay.
right? So that's the common wisdom,
Hmm.
right? And just to push back with numbers, right?
Hmm.
So if you look at Israel, right? So the three best investors in Israel are from Sequoia,
Hmm.
right? Adam from Bessemer, Chaim from Sequoia, Adam from Bessemer, and Michael,
Hmm.
my partner,
that's
originally from
that's your
Benpoint.
scoring, or it's like well known.
No, it's returns wise.
Okay.
So two of them were never operators,
Hmm.
and the third one was in the dinosaur era.
Hmm.
If you look globally, Mike Moritz, right? He was a journalist,
Hmm.
which is amazing because that's network building and kind of investigative journalism. So, i- in more than one way, I think being an operator actually is to your detriment as an investor. And I can share that post Phase.com, it took Gil and I some time before we sat together. In Phase.com, I founded the company, but I was a chairman. So it was the first company I was not an operator. Um,
Why?
because I was running, I was,
There's a why there, right?
yeah, yeah,
Because it's
obviously.
like it's not obvious.
Yeah, I was the CTO of Eternity, so I was kind of busy at the time. But
That's not a good advice to give to the founders, right? Because
no,
you
it's a
want to have
terrible
them
advice. Yeah, yeah,
100% in the
look. There's so
center.
many things that I've done wrong in Face. But post acquisition, Gil and I sit together, and beer one we don't talk, beer two we don't talk, beer three we don't talk, beer four, whiskey one, beer five, whiskey two, and then Gil says the first 2 years with you were miserable,
Mm.
and he's right. Right? It for many operators turned VCs, it takes a long time, if at all, before you can go hands off. Right? So as an investor, you're the authority versus responsibility. Right? So the authority you have, counter to popular belief, is actually fairly low. Right? So in an extreme situation, the board can terminate the CEO. I could say I lost faith, so I'm not investing in the next round. But these are such extreme things.
Mhm.
In the rest of the time, it's convincing. Many times it would be that I'm wrong, anyways, because the founders see the company in a continuous basis. I see it in discrete, like photos.
Mhm.
Right? I don't see it in an ongoing basis. So they have the context usually to make much better decisions than I could. And so you're right that empathy wise, uh, it works really well to be a founder before, no question.
Mhm.
Um, but
But if you
usually, if
want to
you're,
have a good investment, then you need to change
you
the
need to change. Yeah,
perspective.
you have to change the perspective. Even just, I'm now on.
Would you invest in yourself in Face.com as a founder? I mean, as investor today, would you invest in yourself as a founder?
So it's a good question because you're actually asking two questions. So first, Face.com is a business, and then
Asking you as a founder.
myself as a founder.
Yeah.
So the key issue that taught me the importance of equal partnership, and Aleph is an equal partnership, but also I think that for many, many, many startups, that's absolutely the right way to go.
Mhm. Mhm.
Vesting over non-equal split, meaning if the founding team is together in 4 years, they should all have equal split in my mind, right? And the mistake in Face.com was that I didn't do that, and so if I were looking from the outside and looking at the cap table and seeing, well, there are two people that are not working at the company, and two founders that are working at the company have less equity than the other two, most likely I would have never invested, right? So that was just a mistake that taught me what's the right structure.
Because that we see it a lot when we see founding teams that they're not equal in the equity, or they don't have to be completely equal, but it's in the same areas, but when there are big gaps, and or if we see teams that one is not committed to 100% working in the company, hands on, is like have other gigs that he's working on. So even if in the beginning it seems to be okay and we're agreeing on this, it never stays okay. And the bitterness and the feelings that we develop within us, we don't always control it, but that's the way it goes,
Absolutely.
And when you invest so many hours of work during the day and your partner does not, or when you have so many trade-offs that you make and the other partner is not, then later on it will create only conflict between the company.
Animosity.
And it's also, sometimes the company cannot be fundable, because when an investor will look in the eyes of investor what is going on in the company, he will see it immediately.
Yeah. So you're absolutely right. I'd have one asterisk. So it's not that. So let's look at situations. So there's equal split. That's easy. Obviously, for everyone involved, you want reverse vesting, so that if someone leaves, then you still have equity to give to someone that you'd bring in.
Yes.
But in my mind, 51-49, I would never invest. Right?
Because why?
Exactly.
If it's
Like,
just
what's
2%,
going on?
like 1%. So
It's-
why do
it-
you do
it-
it?
it-
What
it-
do you want to show in this?
That they are in control, right? So that's actually, I
It's
think,
a red flag for you.
it's absolutely, it's like a double red flag. But um, 90-10 is not a red flag. I just at that point I would make sure that the founder that has 10% understands that the other person doesn't view him as a founder. It's like as a founding team member.
He's
So
like
as long
the
as
first investor. He's like the first investor of the company.
so as long as he knows that, then that's fine. The 51-49 is a non-starter. Like the gray areas are the 60-40, and many times people think ideas matter, and ideas in most cases are
What's
irrelevant.
your opinion if one of the co-founders joined the company, like, I don't know, 18 months down the road, which they already began to work in this time? So what?
Well, 18 months down the road most likely means that they already had some kind of a funding event, which means that the company has value.
Already, yeah.
Which means that you actually can't give them shares, and you need to give them options, and then the
'cause it's
102, exactly. So so you're actually limited with 9.99.
But sometimes they're not always funded, and it's just working under the radar yet, and from the garage or from WeWork, doesn't matter where, and just they just start to develop the idea, and they bring, let's say, the CTO or another co-founder down the road. So
But that would
makes
be
sense to
but that
have
would be
different.
really sad if it's 18 months until they started working. So let's talk about 3 months or 6 months. And in my mind, actually, I would much prefer, or I believe that the equal split is more important, because if you look at the journey ahead,
You look long term.
if you look at the journey ahead, those 3 months or 6 months actually are meaningless.
Yeah. So let's continue with the equal split, and tell me a little bit about Aleph and the way you work and the way that you manage the partnership, because you know um, very strong investors with a lot of knowledge and a lot of experience already that have different angles for different things. Obviously, you will agree on anything, but there will be many, many things that you disagree or think differently. And this is also good, because we want to have a variety of opinions in order to make the best decision. But how do you manage it within yourself?
So that's an excellent question, because there's I had a lot of learning in that area, and some of it is not because um, people were doing it wrong. It was just the default was different historically, and I'll explain. So, if you look at funds in Israel, the entire VC industry was created 93 through 95 through a government program, who would think, called Yozma.
Mhm.
And I was part of Genesis, and Genesis was like all other funds in Israel at the time, and hierarchical partnership uh, that worked with consensus, right? And there's nothing worse than consensus when it comes, much like you say, right? So if you look at venture and if you distill it, it's kind of two axes. There is the right, wrong, and consensus, non-consensus. And if it's consensus, well, if you're wrong, who cares? You might get lucky, but it doesn't matter. If you're right and it's consensus, then it's likely that the deal will be very expensive because it's consensus. Other investors understand that something that is worthwhile investing, and there will be a lot of competition because other startups also understood. So what you really want is you want to be non-consensus right? And the issue with a consensus decision making is that at least in that small echo chamber of a partnership, people need to believe that that's a good idea, and that's a terrible idea. So one of the very first things that we've done when establishing Aleph, we're kind of I love the idea of constraints. So Aleph is an equal partnership and a partner only firm, which means equal partnership makes the negotiation really simple. Like if I want to bring you over, I tell you what I get, you get. Easy, right? The bar will be very high because I need to feel that you'll be contributing more than me. So that's one. But the key thing is that the partner only firm means that founders know that we can move quickly and that we can always add value. There will never be an associate or principal or industry person sitting at the board.
No hierarchy, and things are going
Oh yeah,
smoothly.
so no no hierarchies is in many ways the equal partnership, and that creates chaos,
Mhm.
right? But so it limits the size of partnership. That's a
Mhm.
trade-off.
Mhm.
You most likely can't go above 7 investing partners.
Mhm.
5 will already be pretty hard because the it's kind of like a CEO. Each of us is a CEO, which means that someone else in the fund needs to push back very, very, very strongly for something not to happen first. Then decision making, which is really interesting because there's a lot of psychology around decision making. So the way it works at Aleph is voting. You vote 1 to 10. You can't vote 5. And actually, that quantitative feedback is just the beginning of the discussion. So if you vote 3, and I brought in the deal, I would generally ask you, so what would get you over 6,
Mhm.
right? But say you brought in a deal and you voted 10 and I voted 1,
Mhm.
the deal goes through.
Mhm.
I will remember that one.
Mhm.
Right? We never write those down, but I will remember that one. And but even more importantly, you get to vote last as the person bringing in the deal,
Mhm.
so you can game the system. So we intentionally built a system that you can game for there to be non-consensus decision making. So if you have strong opinions, right? The funnel of VC is I meet 500 companies, or I get to see
Interest.
500 companies. I meet about 40
Mhm.
a year.
40, that's
Or
it?
that's it. I meet
Okay.
about 10 for a second meeting, and I do 0 to 2 investments a year. And it's been
That's a
consistent for
funnel.
12 years. And but what it means is that if I have the conviction, I can game the system to say I want to get this deal through, right? And so the the way you architect the fund itself and the decision making allows you to fulfill a vision.
And again, it's creating constraints and protocols in order to achieve the vision or to fulfill the vision that you have. But that, I mean, I listened to you describing it, and that requires a lot of trust
Oh
in
yeah.
each other,
Oh fuck yeah.
a lot of trust, and also, I think, putting the ego
Yeah.
to the
Egos.
side.
Yeah. Egos
But
wouldn't work.
as we know, and I know it's a generalization, but it's a bit true, at least to some extent, that in this position of being an investor and playing with a heck lot of money and investing in other companies, etc., ego plays a role
In what?
in the investment process, in the way that investors sometimes act, and being in a position that you create yourself your own inner system that you are non contentious about some of the things and you want to make it right, and you have from like 500 intros a year you invest at the end only in 0 to 2, what like it's a small amount of companies at the end. So trusting each other that you really know what you're doing and not letting the ego managing you in this process is not always
Yeah,
easy.
but let's divide this. So
Okay.
there's the ego question, and then there is a trust, and these are actually separate things in my mind. So um, if you look if you look back, or if you look at a company, a great company would have 10 reasons why not to invest, and 3 reasons why you should.
Hmm.
Right. So like for me, the day of actually doing the investment is a hard day. Right. It's still I'm still conflicted internally about most of the companies, if not all. The the interesting thing is how you're structuring kind of the process within the partnership in order to make sure that you have that trust.
Hmm.
Um, because again, non-consensus.
Hmm.
So if you look at COVID, we actually made sure to meet face to face throughout COVID, other than the major lockups, and created this kind of safe bubble at the time when like quick tests were actually expensive.
Hmm.
Um, we just forced like daily. We came in daily and made sure that we test ourselves and create
You the
kind of the safe.
partners, yeah.
So
Yeah.
and a good bunch of the team,
Yeah.
right? Because the biggest team in Aleph is actually software engineering
Hmm.
that build the tools that allow us to do
Hmm.
a partner only firm, right?
Hmm.
So we need software in order
You need
to
tools.
we need tools
Yeah.
and we need to scale
Hmm.
ourselves. And so we were there because the only way to create the trust, and that applies also to new investments,
Hmm.
like the the kilometers I walked with founders by the beach in that time, I think it was the most I walked ever,
The
because you
only
need to
place you
build
could
that
take,
trust.
yeah, and the only place you could back then, build relationships and
Yeah,
walk around.
yeah, and it's super important. I think that one of the biggest issues in the 2020 and 2021 was kind of velocity of deal making, and relates to your question about FOMO before.
Hmm.
And I think it's really hard and wrong on both sides. This is getting someone out of a cap table is harder than getting divorced, right? And there are no mechanics, right? When getting a divorce, actually, there is a process that is outlined. It's not very easy, it's painful, but with a cap table, you actually can't get someone out. So, for anyone to do a shotgun wedding with a funder because they offered whatever, very quick money, right? Tiger is a great example, and then they disappear, right? And by design. And so I think that's a really bad way um, to construct your next 10 years and building a partnership over the next 10 years.
Hmm.
And so within the partnership, you're absolutely right. And I think that that was one of my concerns starting out with Michael. And it's disproved in any way. I still learn daily from Michael. It's amazing. And same with
Are you good
Tomer.
friends beyond just being partners and
Yeah,
investors?
yeah. One of the key questions that you usually ask is if I'm now stuck at an airport for 12 hours because my flight is delayed,
With
would I
whom?
want to spend the time,
Yeah.
right? And the answer is absolutely, right? Um, and it took a good amount of dating and just getting to know each other.
We have to hit the pause in a couple of minutes, so the audience will have the energy to listen again and again. I want to ask a little bit about, like, you're very analytical in the way that you analyze the things and in the way that you structure even the answers and even the mechanisms. I hear a lot of you're modeling the things, and one things lead to another, and it creates a lot of clarity in the way that we look at the processes. What helps you, balance your inner decision making, the hell of things that you're managing in the day to day, the stress, the responsibility that you have. How do you help yourself, like, balance those things? What do you do?
Well, there are two things
Okay.
in that question, right? There is the question of the stress itself, um, and then also kind of how to handle
Hmm.
it. And so the very first thing is who you partner with, right? And so yeah, I'm somewhat analytical. I'm like this total OCD of a the most disorganized person, right? So at my core, I'm a super disorganized person, and so that's why
That's surprising me.
it's like it yeah, you should speak with some, but
No, because the way you communicate is like very structured and
because of
very
the OCD.
organized.
And so by partnering with Michael and Tomer and Yael, you kind of see, and you made that point earlier, of how you comprise a partnership that augments each other and actually reduces stress levels. Because at the end of the day, because of that feedback loop that takes a while,
Hmm.
you just don't know for a very long while how are you doing,
Hmm.
right? And that's in for venture, that's the um, thing that can create the most stress, right? Is like,
The not
how am I
knowing.
doing?
Hmm.
Like, am I doing a good job? Am I not? Like, where's this going? So that's kind of like that's cornerstone. But then um, I became extremely product productivity oriented at some point around when I was 30.
Hmm.
So measuring any 10 minutes and what's the impact of whatever it is I do. And interestingly, like, there has been a change around when I was 40 where I got to New York and you'll laugh, but 6:30 a.m. meeting canceled. So I land 4:30 a.m. I already have a 6:30 a.m. meeting, and I'm now at the hotel and nothing to do, and I kind of see a guitar there, and I say, well, how about learning how to play the guitar?
With Simply.
With no, at the time, no, so it's terrible, but
Okay.
simply didn't have the guitar product yet, so
And they just started with the piano.
I,
Yeah.
I actually bought a competitor. I'm a board member at Simply.
Wow.
Bought a musician
Yuval
guitar.
knows it.
Ival knows
That you
it.
bought another
Yeah,
app.
yeah, yeah. That's yeah. That's yeah. So and then for 2 hours, I kind of learned.
Wow.
And so what I kind of figured out at the time is that you need white space,
Hmm.
and I was
Exactly.
really terrible at white space.
Hmm.
So because everything was so planned, then suddenly you couldn't put a needle through the calendar. And the honest thing is a VC, and it takes some time before you can admit it, but you can cancel 80% of whatever it is on my calendar, and nothing will happen. Maybe good things will happen,
Hmm.
right? And
You learn how to play the guitar,
you learn how to play the
for
guitar.
example.
And one of the like Eddie Chalet from Genesis was a great teacher,
Hmm.
where when they wanted to recruit me, never mind when I offered, like, oh yeah, I can meet 6 a.m.
Hmm.
in Tel Aviv, I can meet uh, 10 p.m. in
Hmm.
Haifa. He was always available,
Hmm.
which is like he was available for the good things that can happen.
Hmm.
And that's a such a lesson that took me 10 years of being productive
Hmm.
in order to kind of figure out.
That's a beautiful thing that you're mentioning here. And sometimes it comes from, anxieties or the need to feel that we're important and or that we're progressing things and we're all the time having a lot of meetings, whether if it's you're a founder or investors, and understanding that this white space is so important for inner learning, for silence a little bit, for concentration, and also for good things to happen.
Yeah,
And I can say that from
exactly.
my point of view, I don't like that my calendar, and I have a lot of things to do, but I always leave those spaces because I know that my founders will need me at a certain point, and I want to be accessible for them. I want to have the time to be attentive to what they need. So in order to do this, you need to prioritize very very well, and you need to see what's very important and what doesn't need to be
Hmm.
in the calendar, and also how do you consume more knowledge or more quiet or even breathing or meditating in order to be sharper and like more on spot to those who will really benefit from you later on. And it's amazing how from this 6:30 a.m. meeting that got canceled back in New York, that I guess in the same moment it was, oh no, what am I going to do with my time? And I rushed into it, and how do I handle this? A beautiful new thing came to your consciousness, and later on as a habit, as a
Yeah. So yeah, I was. It wasn't anxiety at the time. I was just being pissed off of,
Mhm.
hey, I planned for this meeting, but um, uh, look, today it's funny because I in a structured way I create those white spaces.
Mhm.
So Tuesdays are no meeting Tuesdays, right? I actually do the long the work that needs more creativity,
Mhm.
but meditation, I've been doing that for a while. But the key thing is in being available for something to happen is
You summon it into your life also.
you that I don't know.
Yeah.
I'm not a big. believer in some, but it goes back to luck, right? The
Exactly, because
creating the
it's the
opportunities.
serendipities and
Yeah,
you create.
serendipity.
Exactly, that's what
Serendipity,
I
I actually
meant.
like. Luck is evenly distributed.
Mhm,
It's on you. The onus is on you in order to turn that into something
mhm,
that actually works. But the the so now quarterly, I take 3 days just for learning something new. So in those 3 days, totally unstructured. I have a reading list, and
at home or you go somewhere.
yeah, I used to actually book a when I lived in Herzliya. I actually was booking a hotel room in Tel Aviv for those days, and just so I'm just out now. Less so, but yeah, it can be just walking by the beach and just
Mhm,
making sure that you have the materials handy and
mhm,
a topic that actually deserves learning. But I don't think it's prioritizing necessarily. Like you always have more tasks than time.
mhm,
High priority tasks,
mhm,
things that can actually have an impact. The question is actually not prioritizing, but actually uh, giving priority to having the white space.
mhm.
And regardless of the
Exactly.
fact that there are, you can do really impactful other things that you already know about in that time.
It goes back to choice.
Yeah,
In
exactly.
what do I choose? I choose to
Chooses.
invest in me. I choose to invest in my children. I choose to invest in my time of learning,
Yep.
getting
Totally.
something new into my life, bringing something new into my life. And at the end, I believe that everything comes back to a choice, which can be from
Absolutely.
the mind, from the heart, but our inner choice in how we want to handle things, how we want to build the startups. And even when you make an investment in a startup, why do you choose the startup that you choose? Because why he chose to go to this path, what was his why, what was his reason, everything
so,
connects together.
so I know we're running out of time, but just one
I'm
point
just
that
keeping the time in your calendar, because
yeah, I have 3 more
I'm
minutes.
respecting your
Uh,
time.
I have 3 more minutes because I
Okay.
need to go. But a beautiful thing that kind of I realized after working with Michael.
Mhm,
So I usually I think about how you scale things.
mhm,
So one thing that I always look at with founders is why do they excel and why, right? And so it's actually rather easy to find whether someone excels
mhm,
in a scalable way. So I can look at those 500 deals. I can even look at the 2,000 potential deals and say, are the founders special,
mhm,
right? In you can build classifiers in machine learning. You can actually look at a LinkedIn profile and you kind of know whether that person actually builds stuff
mhm,
or talks about building
mhm,
stuff. And
mhm,
so that has always been my comfort zone. When I started working with Michael, I I couldn't figure out the way he worked, and after a bit of time, I kind of realized that he was looking for the chip on the shoulder,
mhm,
which is interesting because that's a stronger predictor for excellence, but one that doesn't scale. You can't find the chip on the shoulder because no one will speak about the chip on their shoulder in a way digital form that allows you to kind of figure out what like the alcoholic father or the too good of a sibling or whatever. And the amazing thing is that both of these actually get to the same end result, which is finding excellence, finding the founders that are resilient and that get shit done. Michael's way is more accurate but less scalable,
mhm,
and it's pretty like I found it gratifying to kind of figure out that
mhm,
that there are mental models
mhm.
that get to similar results, but that fit your characteristics. Like Michael is really good at talking with someone and understanding what makes them tick. I'm less so.
You said something beautiful that I reflect in the short time that we have. You said the word fit. And I think that at the end, a lot comes back to this word, the product market fit, which we know, but the founder fit, the investor founder fit,
Hmm.
and the investor fit. And fit doesn't mean that we have to think the same,
Hmm.
to get to the same conclusions in the same way, but we have to find the fit that makes us work together.
I
And
love that.
another thing that I like about the chip on the shoulder, a sentence that someone once told me, not everything has to be scalable. And this ability, because I'm thinking about it as well all the time, and this ability of Michael that you said so many, Firgante, you said so many good things about him in the last hour, it makes him a very special man. Um, this ability that he has to to see this chip on the shoulder and to recognize it and to understand how it connects the dots later on that will help this founder to scale his solution and to be very, very resilient in this journey and connected to it. It's amazing, and we don't have to scale everything. This is his own, AI, Michael's AI. We don't necessarily have to make it a generative AI later on or scalable. This is his, success key that belongs to him, and it's amazing that you have it together and you balance each other, each one, and the things that he brings into the equation.
No question. That's the core of partnership, and I totally agree with you. It's the having an additive nature versus we actually mapped when we started Aleph. We kind of we wanted to understand how much our networks overlap,
Mm-hmm.
and the answer is they don't.
Mm-hmm. That's
Right,
interesting.
which is really interesting. Right, it's like 10% overlap.
Mm-hmm.
It's just like Orthodox Jew, 8 kids, New York, kibbutz.
Nigeria,
Yeah, as
dropped out of school.
yeah, as much of a non-believer as they come, and yeah, it's actually
But it's a beautiful way if you would draw the circles, and the overlap, and you say it's just a 10% the overlap between the two circles. But maybe it's not a matter of quantity; it's a matter of quality that actually getting into, the difference between you that later on creates something bigger and
hopefully, yeah,
beautiful.
hopefully. I want to see Aleph in 50 years still there in the succession. There are a lot of hard things ahead, but at least as we are now, I'm very very happy.
And a
And I'm
lot
like,
of great companies that you're building.
we're
Helping,
not building. We're not. Yeah,
supporting
it's
them,
like
helping.
the thing that drives
Sorry.
me crazy is
Okay,
when
okay.
people say, "It's your company."
No,
I'm
it's
like,
no,
"No,
it's
it's not
it's
my
the
company."
founder's company. Definitely,
Exactly.
I'm with you. You're just there to give them the water, to give them the hand, to help with the money, to help with what needs to come along the way, and a good advice and a good guidance.
Hopefully.
Eden, thank you for coming today. We shared so many ideas together, talking about luck and trying to put the mathematics in luck. I'm not sure that there's an answer for it, but and also thinking about different models and how we make decisions, and how we collaborate in a best way, and how trust is the most important foundation that we need to have in a partnership, whether it is in a VC or a startup, and also in life, and the different mechanisms that we create in order, to bridge the gaps that we have, et cetera, et cetera. So thank you for coming today and sharing this knowledge. It was a very, very deep and insightful conversation, one which I'm definitely going to listen again, like to get the nuance. There were many, many nuance
Thank you
in
for
here.
inviting me over.
If founders wants to address you, Aleph, where they can find you?
Really easy. Eden, Eden, at Aleph, Aleph.vc, or
Wonderful.
on Twitter, Eden, Eden.
Wonderful. Thank you. To our lovely listeners, we're going to hit pause until the next episode. That's also something I say to the entrepreneurs in my clinic in between sessions. If you enjoyed listening, I would really appreciate it if you share the podcast with people who you think would derive value from it. Thanks to the amazing studios at Google Campus that allow me to record all this content in here. Feel free to visit my website at galiblochliran.com and leave your details there if you wish to be updated and learn more about the mental aspects of the entrepreneurial journey. Also, be sure to follow my podcast, The Human Founder, in any of your podcast apps. Let's hit pause. Till next time. Thank you again.